Okay, so I'll cover some very basic first. Okay, for some of you who do not know about it. Okay. So we know the IP addresses, right? The unique address given to any device. In our case, to a laptop or a VM, that is an IP address. Then what is a private IP address? It is used within the network. Within the network means if you assign any IP address to your laptop, okay, it has some range. We'll be covering that next. Okay, that private IP cannot be accessed from the internet. Okay, that is a private IP. The public IP, it will be accessible over the internet. Okay, and there is a concept of gateway that is very important. It connects the local network to the internet. Without gateway we cannot connect to the internet. Okay, and there is a broadcast address. Okay, that is the address which is used internally by the system to broadcast or send data to all the devices. And IP addresses are categorized into some classes A, B, C, D, and E. Okay, so the first A, B, and C are private classes. Okay, so these are the private IP addresses. When we assign it to any device, they cannot be accessible over the internet. Okay, so anything in the range of 1 to 126, 128 to 191, and 192 to 223, they will be in the private range, and anything apart from this, they will be public IP addresses. And there is one more class D, that is a multicast. We do not use it. Okay, and E is also that is reserved. Okay, and when we go to our CMD, and when we run this command ipconfig on Windows, so this is the IP address 192.168.1.3. These I got automatically from my router. Okay, and to get and it has a subnet mask 255.255.255.0. We'll learn about this, what is subnet. And our default gateway is 192.168.1.1. Due to this gateway we are able to go outside and connect the outside world. Okay, and this is the IP address of our router, wireless router. Okay, so and what are the subnet masks? Okay, so these IP addresses 192.168.1.3 and all, if we do not have a subnet mask, then we'll be short of IP addresses. Okay, then we need to subnet it, and we can use the same IP address with some other subnet mask. So that's what I can explain as of now, because there is a lot of theory, some binary calculation and all that will not cover here. Okay, but remember the classes private and public IP address, this you should understand what is that. And subnetting. Okay, so generally I've given one example. Okay, so suppose this is a range. Okay, anything, this will be the range 0.0. If I do not have an IP address at the end, that means it is a range. Okay, so this means uh, actually if you see here, we have 192.168.1.3, 255, 255, 255. So instead of 255 three times, okay, so let's see here where it is. 255 three times in this table. Yeah, here. Okay, so generally we give an IP address 192.168.0.1, suppose 0.11 suppose. Okay, then after that either we can write this 255, this is the old method, and nowadays we have to add, while assigning the IP address in Linux, we have to add sometimes this blocks. Instead of writing 255 three times, just add /24. So you can refer this table at least for 192 range. For 10 also there will be a different table, you'll get it on internet. Okay, so this is important, this is called as CIDR. Okay, so instead of writing it like this, it will be slash something. Okay, and /32 means it is an IP address, and /0 means mostly in range. Okay, so just read about it. So what is subnetting? Dividing the network into smaller parts, that is subnetting. So as I said, where we are short of IP addresses due to subnetting, we'll get more IP addresses. Okay. Now, what is VPC? VPC stands for Virtual Private Cloud. So till now, whenever we used to create an EC2 instance, okay. So let's launch an EC2 instance. When we launch an EC2 instance, so when we go to this network settings, okay, if I go to network settings, edit, okay, there will be a default VPC. So when we provision AWS account, or for the first time when we use the AWS account, okay, by default it will create a VPC, virtual private cloud. Okay, so why there is a need for virtual private cloud? We can have different teams in different virtual private cloud, or different softwares in different virtual private cloud. Okay, so this is one of the VPC which is created by default. So when we create when the AWS account is provisioned, okay, there will be a default VPC. Okay, so which one it is? It is this one. Let me go back, and you can see it here, VPC directly. So every region will have its own default VPC. Okay, so if you go to any other region as well, you can see a default VPC. So if you see on this page itself, the VPC dashboard, this is a default VPC which is created. I'll open it in the new tab. Okay, this is the default VPC, and it is also having a private subnet range /16. Okay, so each VPC will have various subnets. Okay, so for each availability zone, there will be a different subnet. This is also created by default. So by default, there will be a VPC. There will also be a subnet. So we can check the subnet details here. So these are subnets. And how we come to know that this is a part of default? So if it will show the subnet ID, and it is a part of this default VPC. Then there will also be a default route table. Okay, so we don't need to remember it, just go to VPC and we can see these are the options. So most of the options we'll be using today, and there will be a default route table as well. So even though this is a virtual private cloud, to it is created on a private IP address range. Okay, this is the private IP address range. So it needs, when it that VPC need to get an internet access, we need to attach an internet gateway to it. Okay, so all these things, routing stuff, is added in this route table. Okay, and when we by default there will be always a internet gateway required for getting an internet. Okay, because most of the subnet and VPC is in the private IP range, it needs an internet address. So we need to attach an internet gateway which will help us in getting an internet connection to the VPC. So there will be a default internet gateway as well when the AWS account is created. So if you see, and there will be a NAT gateway as well. Okay, so we'll learn about NAT gateway later, but remember, a default VPC is there. In that default VPC, for each availability zone there will be subnet, there will be a route table. Okay, route table will have the various routes, okay, to go outside the network or to communicate within the network as well. Okay, some routes are defined there. Then there will be an internet gateway, and by default there is no NAT gateway. Okay, NAT gateway, for the time being, just remember it is used only for private subnet. If you have only private subnet, which for which we do not want to attach directly internet, means that should not be available from the outside world, any subnet range or any EC2 instance in that subnet range. At that time we'll be using NAT gateway to get an internet only. Okay, it will not be available from the outside world. To only get an internet connection, we'll be using NAT gateway. And when we create EC2 instance, we get a public IP address. Okay, so that public IP address is temporary due to some reason. If we reboot it, okay, that IP address may change. Okay, we sometimes we may get the same IP address range, but most of the times it will change. That is ephemeral. Okay, so at that time we can reserve an elastic IP address from this. Okay, go to this elastic IP address. Okay, and we can say allocate elastic IP address. We'll get an IP address, and that IP address we can attach. We will see that later how to attach an elastic IP address to any EC2 instance. Okay, so we are in US East region. Okay, so if you see, there will be a default one VPC, six availability zones are there. So six subnets are there. There is one route table. Okay, which is by default created. There is an internet gateway which is by default created. And what is important, yeah, there will be a default security group as well. Okay, so let's go to security group. So this is the default one. Okay, the other tools we created, while creating you will be having many, so most of the times I delete this one which I create, so it doesn't confuse us. So it's used somewhere, so it's not allowing us to delete. So by default there will be a default security group as well. So let's go back to the table. There will be a network ACL as well. For ACL we'll see later. Okay, so we need to concentrate on VPC, subnet, route table, internet gateway, NAT gateway, and security groups. Okay, so except NAT gateway, everything is created by default. Okay, till now we were creating a VM in a default VPC, default subnet. It was automatically attached. Internet gateway was automatically attached to the VPC, and we were able to download the packages and all, and we were also able to SSH it. Okay, it was due to internet gateway, but there was most of the times we can use the default security group as well. But today what we will do is we'll create our own VPC. It is not recommended to use the default one. So in a production environment, the default ones are deleted. Okay, we create our own VPCs, own internet gateways, own subnets, own route tables, and for private subnets or private EC2 instances, we create NAT gateway as well. So our next exercise is same. So what we are achieving here, so I'll explain it through this diagram. We'll first create a VPC that will have a 10 dot range. So I don't know about all of you, but I have a VPC which has this range 172. Okay, so this will be useful when we create one more VPC. Our VPC will be available here. It will have some random ID, and always look at the this CIDR. It will be 10 dot for me. So we'll be creating a VPC which will be in the range 10.10.0.0.16. Okay, then we will create a public subnet with the range 10.0.1.0, and we'll also create one more private subnet 10.0.2.0. Okay, so if you see, both are in different network. And why we say public and private subnet? Okay, so there are a few EC2 instances which will be creating that will be facing internet. Okay, that we can directly access. Okay, so those will be kept in the public subnet. Okay, and there will be few EC2 instances which we cannot which should not be given direct public access. Those will be kept in the private subnet. So EC2 instance one is in a public subnet, and this one is a private subnet. So when we create the subnet for the first time, okay, it will have this range 1.0, it will have this range 2.0. Okay, so it doesn't at for the first time when we create it, they both are only subnets. What makes it public subnet? The internet gateway. Okay, so the public subnet gets an internet is attached to internet gateway. Okay, but the private subnet is not, so we do not get and then we have the directly access to the private subnets. Okay, the only thing is this will be public spacing, and this is not publicly facing. Okay, and now there is also a router. So this internet gateway, NAT gateway, router, this we cannot see, these are all virtual. Okay, when we will just create it, so there will be a router which we cannot see, we will just see route table. So this is the default route, okay, for the public subnet. So we'll be creating a route for public subnet and private subnet as well. So by default there is only one route table that is common to both. So here we'll create a different public subnet table and a separate private subnet table. Okay, so public subnet table needs an internet gateway. Okay, so this rule needs to be added, that whenever a request comes from anywhere on the internet, it should go to internet gateway, and the internet gateway will forward it to the EC2 instance. Okay, and in this case, as there is no route defined for internet gateway in private subnet, the private subnet instance will not have any connection from the outside world, but this EC2 instance needs access to internet for downloading packages and all. Okay, so at that time it needs to go via NAT gateway. Okay, so whatever outbound or whatever the traffic which wants to go out, that is from this one to NAT gateway, it will go first to the NAT gateway, and then it will download the packages. And remember, sometimes we get confused, the NAT gateway is private for private subnet, it is for private subnet, but it is created in a public subnet. Okay, because it is connected to the internet. Okay, and NAT gateway is not created in the private subnet. So these are very important things. Okay, so remember, we'll be creating a public subnet and a private subnet. Private subnet doesn't have a direct access. Okay, public subnet is directly accessed, and all this access and routing is done by route tables. Okay, internet gateway is only for getting the internet for public subnet. Okay, and the NAT gateway is for out means outbound traffic. Okay, NAT gateway, public private subnet, and on top of it, okay, for each instance there will be a security group. Okay, so this I haven't mentioned, but we used to create a security group, right? So EC2 instance, we if we need SSH access, we need to allow port number 22. So by default everything is denied. We were And if we need that this port 80 should be available of this EC2 instance, we need to open a port in security group as well. Okay, so that's long theory, a bit long theory. Yeah.
Yeah. In private subnet EC2 instance,
Mhm.
the gateway will be of NAT gateway, right?
So when we see that, say that NAT, okay, so it does automatically in VPC. We do not care about the gateway. On our laptops and all, we care about the NAT gateway and all. So it will be getting an automatically IP address from DHCP in the VPC. So don't worry about the gateway. Okay, so we'll perform the exercise now.